Introducing the new DocsTradingPost.com, your online survival superstore for the lowest priced guns, ammunition, and optics available online. Prepare today at DocsTradingPost.com. This is the Doc with the SD Weekly Metals and Markets Wrap. Joining us this week and filling in for Eric is our good friend Dave Kranzler. It's great to have you back, Dave.
Thanks, Doc. It's great to be back. I always love being on this show.
Get right to it. Quite an interesting week in the markets, and finally gold and silver have been moving to the upside this week here. We've got about 3 days in a row where gold and silver are moving to the upside. We're recording this here on the 18th, Friday afternoon, and gold is up just about $40 over the last 48 hours. Silver is up a good buck. So obviously we're still, from a long-term perspective, we're still a lot closer to the lows than any recent highs, but it looks like possibly that the momentum shift has begun with, on Thursday, the market kind of finally realizing that Janet Yellen really has been backed into a corner and is not going to be able to raise rates. What's your take, Dave?
Yeah, well, I've been saying all along the Fed's they can't raise rates unless they want to, purposely crash the system. And I put out a blog post last week where I said, look, she's not going to raise rates. I think I put it out on Tuesday maybe, or Monday. And I said, and at that time it was like there was a lot of people folding and saying they were going to raise rates. In fact, my good friend John Titus, who put out a video on the Fed, it's phenomenal work, and it's a little bit viral in our community. I asked him what he thought, because he's studied the Fed as in depth and as intensely as anyone I know. He said he thought they were going to do a gratuitous, eighth or quarter point hike. And I said, no, they're not going to. And lo and behold, at the last minute, all of a sudden Goldman came out and said, oh yeah, no, she's not going to raise. So they kind of had inside information on that, but it's all a big bluff, and it's a bluff that's designed to maintain the Fed's credibility for purposes of supporting the dollar, because the dollar, having a strong dollar, supports all of their fraud and corruption and manipulation that they have going on, and once they lose that, it's over. And I thought it was kind of interesting, out of one side of her mouth, she was talking about how they had brief discussions about, theoretically, would we need to use QE if it looked like the economy started getting weak again? And yet at the same time, she's like, well, we may raise rates in October, and she's still trying to kick that bluff down the road, and it's just at the end of the day, it's eventually going to come back and bite them in the ass.
And what was perhaps even more interesting than the fact that they did not raise rates yesterday on Thursday was that one of the voters actually was advocating NIRP, or negative interest rates.
Yeah, that's probably coming too at some point. I did find it a little bit shocking that they brought that up. There has to be a reason why they brought it up, and I'm guessing they're probably introducing that idea into their commentary. So it's interesting. It's such a well-crafted propaganda machine, and everything is they probably spend more time in between meetings figuring out how they're going to actually write their statement. And my buddy Titus, after pouring through Fed transcripts, which are made available 5 years after the Fed meetings, was pouring through the 2009 Fed transcripts, which were released at the beginning of 2015. And he concluded that the FOMC is not the decision makers. He said that the decision on monetary policy comes from the outside, and it's passed through the Fed staffers. And he said the real key to understanding what's going on in the Fed is to get the Fed staff notes, and he said you can't get those. And he said that most of the people sitting around that table are there purely for decorative purposes. They're academics, they're regional Fed presidents, they're representatives from Wall Street. And he said they're just there purely for polish. They don't have any input on what goes on. He said He said it's possible that the person running the FOMC, the chairman and possibly the co-chairman, may be in on the rig at some point, but he said the decisions are definitely coming from an outside element. So, and I've always kind of felt that. I've always said, the Fed's not really the ones here calling the shots. There's a higher power behind the scenes that we're not seeing. And I think it's probably guys like Warren Buffett and George Soros, because it was interesting. I think it was last week or the week before, Buffett was on Fox Business, and I just happened to catch it by mistake. And I always have those shows on mute, but the sort of the subtitles as he was being interviewed by Liz Clayman, it basically said, Warren Buffett said, if I were the Fed, I would not raise rates right now. And so that kind of told me right there that my conviction was probably right.
Right. Let's shift gears a little bit here and discuss the state of the physical markets for precious metals here in the U.S., and especially silver. We continue to see tightness in the markets, in the metals. And even with over the past week, we've seen retail demand calm down a little bit from the recent epic levels we've seen over the past 4 to 6 weeks. But even in the face of that, both retail and wholesale premiums continue to climb. Silver Eagle premiums continue to climb nearly daily, even throughout this week. None of the authorized dealers have any coins available. They're all selling on future allocations, what they expect to get from the mint. I was just talking with one of them, and just before we started recording the show, and they were on a phone call with the U.S. Mint just prior to that, and one of their main presses was broken, so it's not official yet, but they're advising that the next few weeks allocations are going to be reduced because one of their presses is down. And I mean, we're just seeing really mind-blowing numbers in the wholesale market right now. Silver Eagles are selling in the wholesale market for between $4 to $5 over spot, and so you're talking wholesale dealers purchasing from the authorized purchasers for $4 to $5 over spot. So that's why you're seeing $5 to $6 retail premiums right now, as there really just aren't any coins available. The U.S. Mint has sold another 2 million coins in September on their allocations. They're up to 34.3 million on the year. And talking with some of the people in the industry, it's really looking like the U.S. Mint is going to keep producing about 1 million coins, 800,000, 1 million coins a week for the next probably 6 weeks, and then come end of November, they're probably just going to shut her down for the year and try to build up 5 to 7 million ounces of the 16 coins, is what I'm expecting. And when we have a situation where the market already is completely sold through in all the 2015 coins, I think there's going to be about a 6 to 8 week period where there aren't any Silver Eagles available anywhere. So it's certainly going to be interesting. The Canadian Mint continues their struggles and problems. Really sourcing any product from the Canadian Mint is pretty difficult currently. And I mean, the private mints, I think I remarked in last week's show, if you call up wanting to purchase wholesale from the Sunshine Mint, you're looking at around Christmas delivery. And fall hasn't even officially started yet here in the U.S.
It's pretty incredible. And in my opinion, well, first of all, to me, that's just clear-cut, definitive evidence that not only is the gold and silver markets manipulated, which we all know, but the price is just way too low. I mean, essentially, with premiums at $5, and that's for a mint box. So you're going to pay more if you want to buy less than a mint box. With premiums at $5, to me, that tells you where the physical market is right now. And we don't really know where the real physical market is because there's not enough supply to meet demand. I mean, you might even bring out more buyers if there was more supply available. That's the argument they're using in the housing industry. And so when you mention that you see the volume is kind of calmed down a little bit, this week, that doesn't surprise me because I think a lot of people who know and want to buy, they know that it's hard to get products, so they might not even be trying. But I would suggest, and I think what we might see is with the price rise that we've had over the last couple of days, I think we'll start to see people jump back in, and premiums might get bid up even higher because people are going to want to try and buy what they can before the price goes even higher. I think you've got a lot of people who are sitting on the sidelines saying, okay, well, I could have bought this at, closer to 14 plus $3, 2 or 3 weeks ago. And now you're telling me I have to pay over $20 an ounce, and I'll just wait for the market to come back. That's always the retail adage. I'll wait till the market comes back, up or down. If it goes lower, if they want to buy.
And especially with the spot price. Spot was just $14.50 last week, so I'll wait a few days, and then once it comes back to $14.50, I'll buy there. And then the market doesn't do that. The market gets a bit of, whether you call it a squeeze or just rallies. But I totally agree. If silver continues to recover into next week and makes a run towards 16 and through it, you're going to see a lot of people who have been sitting on the sidelines come out and try to acquire what they can find. And there's really not too much available currently.
That's exactly right. And it's not just this country, Doc, because I get emails from people all over the world who read my blog. And this is just the latest one. This one's from the UK, but I've had almost the identical email coming from, not verbatim, but saying the same thing, from Australia and one from Hong Kong. And that's what this guy was saying. He goes, I was looking at my bullion dealer, and this guy's in the UK. I was looking at my bullion dealer online today regarding a gold purchase, but I had a look at what was available in silver too. They virtually had nothing, coins or bars. There was a better selection on gold, which is also true in this country, but that's because it costs more to buy an ounce of gold. Also, delivery times have been pushed back. 3 months ago, when they were out of stock, it would be a 2 to 3 week delay. Now it's 4 to 6 weeks. Some were 8 to 9 weeks. What is fascinating about this is that it is happening in a virtual media blackout. There is no coverage on TV or in newspapers about how physical gold and silver is flying out the door. If it was an iPhone, the media would be all over it. And he's right. He's absolutely right.
Yeah, if we had a 9-week delay on the latest iPhone, it'd be front page news all over Bloomberg.
Exactly. New York Post, Fox News, CNBC. I mean, it's a joke. The whole thing's just an absolute joke. And I do see that it was announced 2 days ago that the Mint lowered its weekly allocation by another 19% this week. They made that announcement. I'm sure you already know that.
Right. And I mean, it's really a joke about the U.S. Mint because, while it is I believe a wholesale shortage is in the progress of developing, it's more pronounced right now at the retail level, and that starts with the U.S. Mint and Silver Eagles. And this is my personal opinion, but the U.S. Mint has not run the San Francisco Mint this entire year. They have not produced a single bullion Silver Eagle from the San Francisco Mint in 2015. In all the recent years prior, they were producing Silver Eagles at West Point as well as the San Francisco Mint, but they haven't been using the San Francisco Mint to produce the bullion Silver Eagle coins. There's still, that facility is still in operation, still has employees, and it's still producing other things, but to me, that's a pretty clear-cut indicator that the U.S. Mint is not at their absolute capacity because they're not even using one of their mints.
That's interesting because I was gonna lift my leg on the production capacity argument that was put out there by some charlatans earlier this week. It's not even worth acknowledging who it was and what he said, but because the arguments are so duplicitous and full of half-truths, distorted truths, and intentional omission of facts. But a good friend and colleague of mine made this observation, and I'm kind of floored that no one else has mentioned it. I didn't notice it, but you would think with this many eyeballs on the market that someone would have noticed this. But don't you? And this to me tells us that there is a wholesale shortage because, first of all, we can't trust the reported inventory numbers on the COMEX or in SLV. All right, I've read through the contract on SLV, the prospectus, line by line, and there's no way to hold SLV accountable to what they report. In other words, the silver that they say is in their vault, it may or may not be there, and there's no way to prove it, and no one's allowed to go knock on their door to have a look. So just because they report something doesn't mean it's there. And even if the bars are sitting there physically in the vaults, that doesn't mean they're not encumbered by a leasehold or some sort of form of hypothecation. And it's the same thing at the COMEX. There's no way to validate whether or not the silver that they're reporting in those warehouses is actually there. I do know that in 2010, during a time when the retail coin market was tight, we tried to take delivery of some bars from the COMEX in our fund, and this was in April. We went in, jumped in, and bought the April silver contract, and we wanted delivery of some bars. It took HSBC 7 weeks to get us the bars, and contractually, they're supposed to make arrangements to deliver the bars within 3 days after the end of the contract month. So, I mean, it just goes to show you, and they showed plenty of silver in their vaults. So there's no telling what's really behind the curtain in the wholesale market. But this gets me back to the point, the observation that my friend made. And he loves your site, by the way. Isn't it kind of interesting that the United States exported a record amount of silver to India in July, and yet we can't get enough silver to the mint to produce enough silver eagles to meet demand? And I will note, by the way, that it is a matter of law that the mint is supposed to produce enough silver eagles to meet demand. And originally they were supposed to do it using only domestically sourced produced silver. And in 2010, they had to amend that law to allow the mint to import silver from Mexico in order to meet the demand that was starting to grow. And now we're seeing massive retail shortages in silver in this country. The mint can't meet demand, and yet this country is exporting wholesale silver to India. I mean, to me, that's direct evidence that there's a wholesale shortage of silver. Am I wrong?
Yeah, something certainly isn't right with that picture.
I mean, it blows my mind when you think about it, and it's there right in front of us, and no one's talked about it. No one, my friend noticed it. He's like, "Isn't this strange? There must be a wholesale shortage if they are exporting silver to India, because that tells us that all those bars that we're seeing sitting in the COMEX vaults or the SLV vaults, and we don't even know how much silver the LBMA is laying claim to. If that silver is there, then why does the U.S. have to export all this silver to India to make deliveries? That's the wholesale market right there.
Right. And it really will only take one or two big players having a delay or not getting their silver in a timely manner to really shake the market up. I mean, that's
right, and I think that's why they don't care if there's a retail shortage in this country, because no one cares about that. And I think they're diverting that silver that should be going to the mint, or some of that silver, and they're using it to make deliveries into India and China. And that tells you right there that there's a lot of stress in the wholesale market. And just for point of reference on that data, SRS Rocco had an article that he posted. It was either late last week or maybe on Monday, where he has all the graphs showing the proof.
Definitely check out his article if you haven't. SRS always has very excellent and well-researched information on the silver market. Probably one of the best experts in the industry, in my opinion.
I agree with that. And I know he's, knowing him for a couple of years, I know he's meticulous in his work.
Well, Dave, before we wrap the show up, let's back up and get a bigger picture of the overall market here. We're at the end of the Shemitah week. A lot of people in our industry were looking for a big, epic, complete financial meltdown this week. That hasn't happened, but we're certainly not out of the woods yet as far as the fall crash season is concerned. What's your take on where we're at here in the overall market as we enter the fourth quarter? Are we, in your opinion, are we still facing the potential for a 2008 style crash this fall, or is that maybe a year or years ahead of us yet?
That's a good question. Let me just circle back really quickly to the Shemitah thing. I mean, I know there's cycles in nature, and I'm not really an adherent to the Shemitah theory. Certainly, we could be going through another natural cyclical wave that's going to take our system down. Whether or not it's because of the Shemitah or not, who knows? But I do think I don't know if it was this week. I know that the date September 23rd has come up a lot. And the reason why I remember that is because it's my birthday. It's also the birthday of the colleague that I just mentioned who noticed the exports to, connected the silver exports to India with the shortages here in this country at the retail level. And also what's a little spooky is I have a new used car that I bought about a month ago, and the temporary license expires on the September 23rd. So I'm sitting there wondering if my car is going to blow up on the 23rd. Be kind of fitting, wouldn't it? But the 23rd is a date that a lot of people have mentioned, and I don't know if that was connected to something in the Shemitah idea or whatever. But at any rate, in terms of the economy, in the article on my blog where I posted, where I said the Fed's not going to raise interest rates this week, I provided some economic evidence that shows that the economy is tailing off and contracting at about the same rate that it was in 2008 and 2009. And we've seen all kinds of, Zero Hedge does a good job at posting all of the economic data and comparing it to what was going on at the, in the same data in 2008 and 2009. And there's some spooky, almost every economic piece of data has a spooky parallel with what was going on back then. And then today in a blog post where I titled it "Yellen Folds Her Cards and Admits that it was a bluff," which is basically what happened. But there was an interesting comment that came up at an Eric Hunsader conference yesterday that another buddy of mine attended, and they had said that in the summer of 2011 is when all hell broke loose in the markets with regard to when did rule of law seem to disappear from the markets. And so I went back and I wanted to look at, I just took the main component of the economy, which is retail sales. It's the consumer is 70% of the economy. And the first graph I looked at was the year-over-year change in growth in retail sales since 2010. That's just because the easy cutoff point on the Fed data is 5 years. And it turns out that there is a definitive downtrend in the sales growth rate of total retail sales since the beginning of 2011. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. And then what I did is I took the Fed data and I stripped out auto sales from retail sales. And retail sales since the summer of 2011 are almost on a 45-degree line going downward from left to right. So in other words, if you strip out auto sales, retail sales have been in a major decline since the summer of 2011. And I think really, to me, that tells me that the economy's been a lot weaker than advertised since then. We had the initial stimulus of QE that they pumped into the system. That was in the system for 2 years, and we got a small bounce. It was obviously a QE manipulated bounce in the economic numbers, and they've been declining since 2011. I mean, you're talking about 70% of the economy there. And I also point out that auto sales have been primarily stimulated by the largest explosion in subprime loans made available to car buyers in the history of the auto industry. And so if you take that component away, retail sales would have been a complete disaster. But back to whether or not the economy, what I think is going on in the economy, I said I thought it really hit a wall last summer in the summer of 2014. And that's when I noticed that year-over-year sales in housing started declining. They've propped the housing back up because mortgage rates were back towards a record low this winter and spring. And interestingly, I've got data that shows it, but I just haven't had a chance to write about it. It looks like about 40% of existing home sales has gone to investors and flippers in the first 6 months of this year. So to the extent that we had any kind of somewhat meaningful bounce in the housing market, it was primarily driven by flippers and investors. And that's not sustaining. It's not sustainable. And I think that started to hit a wall in the middle of this last summer, and I think we're going to start to see really ugly numbers coming out of the housing market going forward. We've already started to see that when you saw the housing starts, which to me is sort of a superficial indicator of what's going on in the housing market. But I also have an article where the CEO of Redfin makes the quote that if people could see what we've seen, and this article was released in July, if people could see what we're seeing in the housing market, they'd be horrified. And that's not the exact quote. So my point here is, you take away, you say, okay, retail sales are declining, have been declining. We got a bump in housing, we got a bump in auto sales, and also indications are that auto sales are starting to really tank now as well. We got a little bit of a bump in housing and auto sales, all of it stimulated by easy credit. And you start to take that away, you don't have any semblance of an economy at all. And so I guess this is to say that I think the economy is going to really take a hit this fall, and I think it's going to get ugly.
It sounds like, Dave, we need to put our heads together and come up with some financial product that can short used cars.
Well, now that you mention it, I will be turning out some research when I get a chance to do it. I will be turning out some research that will have some ideas that will take advantage of companies that are overbloated and overexposed to the auto industry in terms of financing. So there are ways to do it.
Yeah, very interesting info. All right, well, we appreciate the time, Dave. It's always great to have you back on the show and get your perspective on the precious metals markets, but not only those, but the macroeconomy as well.
Well, hey, thanks. I don't know what kind of perspective I had on the precious metals market. I mean, when people ask me about it, I'm like, look, you can take it from me, but go listen to, guys like the doc at Silver Doctors. I mean, this is a guy that's boots on the ground, coin sales. He knows what's going on in the market. He talks to the wholesalers. Don't take it from writers like me or some of these charlatans that are putting out pieces claiming there's not a physical shortage. They don't know. They're not in the ground every day seeing what's really going on. So kudos to you as well, Doc.
All right, well, I appreciate it, Dave. All right, we'll wrap up this week's show there. So for the Doc and Dave Kranzler, thanks for tuning into this week's SD Weekly Metals and Markets.